Hi guys. So today on Writing Notes we're going to talk about thesis statements. Now thesis statements are a super important component of writing. Almost any writing class that you ever take is going to ask you to write thesis statements. So what is a thesis statement? Let's start there. Well, basically a thesis statement is the central argument that you plan to make in your paper. So it'll generally be 1 to 2 sentences. Some people say strictly 1 sentence, some people are more sort of open about it. And basically what it does is it sets up the argument that you're going to make. And then the rest of your paper is devoted to proving that thesis statement. Where is a thesis statement located? So this is again a question that we've got some divided opinions on. Some people, very traditional American rhetoric, Western rhetoric, says at the end of the introductory paragraph or introductory section, you should get the thesis statement. Depending on your instructor, this isn't necessarily true. I've read some very excellent papers that start out sort of more open, posing questions, exploring ideas, and then gradually build up to a thesis near the end. So there's different ways you can do it, but generally you're going to get the thesis either at the beginning of the paper, right after the introduction, or near the end of the paper. How do you write a good thesis statement? This is a thing that a ton of students struggle with. So I'm going to give you guys 6 criteria that go into writing a good thesis statement. So a good thesis statement should be, number 1, contestable. This is big. Number 2, supportable. 3, specific. 4, substantive. 5, conclusive. And 6, elegant. So let's talk about what some of these mean, alright? So when we talk about a thesis being contestable, this is probably the biggest key component of a thesis. If your thesis is not making an argument that someone could reasonably disagree with, you're not really making a thesis. So, if for instance we take education as our topic, we want to create a thesis about education. If our statement is, for instance, the problems in education should be fixed, that's not really a thesis for a number of reasons. The main one is because it's not really contestable. I mean, nobody could say, no, we need more problems in education, and put together a reasonable argument to support that. On the other hand, if we said we should fix the problems in education by moving back to a liberal arts model rather than a sort of service model, that's something that could be debated. Someone could reasonably make the argument that we should continue moving in the direction that we are moving, which is more of a service direction, which is more of a producing people with specific, say, STEM knowledge and things like this, as opposed to a liberal arts model. That's a debatable claim. So this would be an okay thesis statement. Is it supportable? Yes. I mean, there's different kinds of evidence that you can draw on to support this. You can draw on the history of education, you can draw on education theory, pedagogy theory, and so on to support this claim. Is it specific? Maybe. It depends on how you approach the rest of the paper. So again, if we take our original claim, the problems in education should be fixed, this is very general. This is way too general, particularly if you're working with, say, a 10 to 12 page paper, or even shorter. It doesn't explain, this claim doesn't explain what kinds of problems there are. It doesn't explain what we should do to fix it. Now, even our better thesis, the problems in education should be fixed by going back to a liberal arts model rather than a service model, is more specific because we have a proposed solution, but it's not more specific about the problems that should be solved. So we're still just saying the problems in education, which is probably too general. So, for instance, we might say, the problem with low student retention rates can be fixed by going back to a liberal arts model rather than a service model. Now, whether or not I would actually make that claim, I'm not entirely sure, but that's a more specific thesis statement. So it's specific, it's supportable, and it's contestable. So far we've checked off the top 3 things on our list. It needs to be substantive. This is pretty substantive. I mean, this is a claim. Basically what we mean by substantive is, does anyone care about it, or would anyone care about it? And because we're talking about the way that education is structured, education reform is a big topic right now, especially in terms of things like student debt crisis. There are a lot of people who are asking questions about whether or not university is even worth it. So this is a substantive topic because it's something that people care about, that people are interested in, and it's making an argument about a way to give people a better value for their money. Is it conclusive? Yeah, it's pretty conclusive. I mean, we have a problem, and then we have a solution. So the problem in this case, the problem this thesis sets up, is the student high dropout rates in university. The problem is solved, in theory, in this argument, by a return to a liberal arts model of education. And then our last criteria, is it elegant? More or less. Elegance is probably... Okay, so I'll say 2 things about elegance. 1, the stakes are probably the lowest for having an elegant thesis statement. It's much more important to have it contestable, supportable, specific, and substantive. Conclusive, yeah, is important. My sense is if you hit the first 4 marks, you're gonna hit conclusive as well. Elegant, the stakes are a bit lower, and the problem with elegance is that it really depends on who's reading it, whether they find it elegant or not. Now, to a certain degree, there's a sort of objective, yes, this is not clunky, yes, this flows, yes, this has a logic to it kind of approach to this. But in terms of elegance itself, what we mean by elegance is very broad, and it may refer to things like style. It may refer to things like tone, word choice, and so on. So anyway, to wrap up, a thesis is, in Western rhetoric and US rhetoric, the driving component of an argument. A thesis tells us what it is that we can expect the argument to be about. It tells us to a certain degree what the stakes of the argument are, and it tells us what your conclusion is. Remember, 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 put a thesis statement in your papers.